Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Baso Nzenze, and I'm a Vice Dean in the Faculty of Humanities here at the University of Johannesburg. And I can't say what a joy it is to be having you here today, to be hosting you for this important gathering. So I think we'd all agree that given the theme, especially for our conference that sort of reflects on 30 years of democratic scholarship, of scholarship in the democratic era, that a lot of sacrifice was made for this to be achieved, for our institutions to flourish as they do, and for all of us to enjoy the liberties that we do. And so here in the Faculty of Humanities, we've undertaken an initiative led by the African Center for Epistemology and the Philosophy of Science to have those who sacrificed for our freedom to do the welcoming at this institution in honor of the great sacrifices that they made, and also so that we can properly constitute our meetings in an authentically African way. And so it is my honor today to welcome two such heroes of our country who were part of the, were leaders in the 1976 Soweto uprising that I think we all know all too well. I would therefore love to welcome to the podium to welcome us properly, Mayor Joyce Dipale and Mayor Elizabeth More. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth More. I'm Miss Mama Joyce Dipale. We are a committee from the freedom fighters in Soweto, the June 1976 uprising. We would like to welcome all of you, and we are very honored to be with you all, and I also feel that you are also honored to be with us today. From the years that we've been through, I'm just gonna say a little bit about Mama Joyce because she went across to exile, and therefore she's living with aphasia. Aphasia is a stroke that captures her memory sometimes, and also the speech. She's unable to speak well, but you just have to be patient with her when she says the words that, she can't finish. Yes, we are very much honored to be with you today, and the reflection from 1994 until now, 2024. In 1994, we made a decision. We all voted for the ANC, and so from 1994, since we had this democracy, we know that now as students, everyone, you have freedom for education, you have freedom for health, you have freedom for housing, we have freedom for whatever you need in this country. Lots have changed. Good things happened from 1994 to 2024. But the work is not completed. It's still going on. So maybe we still have to have patience with whatever outcome that comes. We do have our own issues as elders fighting for the freedom, but we're still not happy about things that we think maybe they will come right in the future. and also the development of the country from 1994 to 2024. There are lots of developments that happened between those years. You know, prior to 1994, we didn't have any freedom of movement. Now we do have freedom of movement. You can move and stay wherever, where you want to build a house or whatever. During those times, we were supposed to be staying in Soweto, all of us. We were not supposed to come and stay in the suburb, whether you have money or not. Yes. Also, we have friends with different races. We all know that during those years, I wouldn't have a friend of another race. If I have a friend of another race, I will daily sleep in the cell for the night, because why do I have that friend with that race? I can't even greet her and maybe just say hug and say hello. Then they will just take you the other way around. Yeah, that was not the nice experience. So far, as I'm saying that a lot have changed, we have lots of development. Not everything is completed, but we still have hope that everything will come okay. So I'm just going to give Mama Joyce a little bit of time to say some few words.
Hi, everybody. Read first this one, and then this one.
From where?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Joyce Bitumelo Dipale. I have a stroke. As a result, I have aphasia, communication impairment. Okay. Speaking takes a little more time. Speaking is very difficult. Writing keywords helps. Comprehending speech is difficult. I use simple drawings. Numbers are very difficult for me. All right. Be patient. Give me time to communicate.
Sorry.
Speak simply and directly to me. Do not shout. It does not help. Ask yes, no questions.
Thank you. Professor Veli Dimbo, thank you so much. You know, Google Joyce Dipale, whatever, no speech, but survive anyway. Torture, jail, Gaborone, bullets, but survive. So at least, but now I'm better. You know, oh, by the way, Oliver Tambo died recently, airport. Same thing, stroke. John Tantla, vets and youth headway, doctor, young doctor, 40 years old. Aphasia, same thing, me and you, completely read and write gone, but slowly again, whatever. But now,
30 years of democracy in South Africa.
yeah, you know, 30 years democracy, and then this.
Okay, government of national unity.
Yeah, recently 100 whatever, but said so ANC, but now joined. So I hope, you know, for instance, this.
What's this?
Yes. Bill.
Bill. Yeah, education.
DA, for instance, no. But education, whatever. But economy, little bit, you know. Now, recently, Soweto, food, whatever.
Yes.
Now,
Children are dying of food poisoning.
Yeah. But never mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I feel quite honored speaking after you. Thank you. Well, I'm very happy, I'm honored to welcome all of you here today as we reflect on 30 years of democracy in South Africa. I'm Beth Leroux. I'm a professor of publishing studies at the University of Pretoria, and together with my colleague, Professor Bebe Zageye, we've been working over the past year or so to create a collection of books, a series that reflects on 30 years of democracy in South Africa, and then to put together this colloquium as well, to share, to reflect, to celebrate in some ways what is really an important milestone for our country. The book series, which I'll talk about a little later as well, and this event itself are real products of collaboration. I want to emphasize that there's so many partners who have been involved in this. There's Routledge, Taylor and Francis, UNISA Press, and Skotaville, the publishing partners for the book series, the Global South's Hub and Third World Quarterly, and the Global South Colloquium Fund, which have come together to support us very much. The Gallery MOMO, we'll talk about that a little later as well. And then we're very thankful to the University of Johannesburg for hosting us as well. I want to tell you just a little bit about how the day will be structured before I'm going to call on Abebe to introduce our keynote speaker. So we will begin with our keynote from Nomboniso Gasa, a feminist researcher and public speaker on a wide range of issues. I'm really looking forward to hearing from her. Then Abebe and I will talk about the book series a bit as well. And then we have two panel discussions. One is a panel with a variety of scholars who are going to be thinking about the past 30 years through the lens of their specific disciplines. So we've, art history, politics, and various other disciplines as well. And then in the afternoon, we'll have a session with some journal editors, people who've been working on South African journals for quite some time, and who will also be reflecting on changes in the scholarship and how they have worked with that over the past years. Just a couple of housekeeping issues. The Wi-Fi password is available on the wall there. We do have a hybrid component to this event as well. So there are online participants joining us through Zoom. So that's, if anyone speaks, they need to speak through a microphone. So there will be some roving mics for that as well. And if you're going to be using any form of social media to talk about the event, then please use the hashtag #SAReflects. Thanks very much. I'm going to hand over to Abebe then to introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's actually, in many ways, it's quite easy to introduce our keynote speaker. And if you want to know more about her, it's online, etc. But I'm going to tell a story how we met and our relationship over the last almost 3 decades. Nomboniso was a student at University of Western Cape. She came over to Oxford for a summer school I put together, 1988. There was a group of South African students, something like 15, a group of African American students, maybe 20, British and other students were there. A week before the conference, I got a letter from Road Trust telling me they don't have any money to support South African students, black South African students. The day after that, I got the grandson of the Woods applying to attend. And I thought it was the easy answer. Yes, you can attend if you pay. The next day, I got a letter from Road Trust. We'll pay for it. And he can attend. This is the year the book, The Satanical Verse, was out. Britain was on edge. There was a fatwa on the author. And after a week, I didn't have a choice but to accept him. And I think that you see the explanation for that. We were getting credit from the university, therefore we have to accept all students. The typical liberal line. He was in. Within a week, the African American students found about this guy, and they want to kick him out. And they demanded he should be kicked out. And I asked one of the guys, why? This is the rules. No, we have to kick him out. So Nomboniso and the other 15 students called a meeting in a typical South African way. I was summoned to a meeting in the evening, and we had a discussion about the issue. To a certain extent, it talks about the democratic nature of debate in South Africa. They asked me, how did this person come? I told them the story. That's not good enough. What do you mean? He has to have a clearance from the popular movements. Okay, I would ask him to do that. The next morning, I got a call from the NC office. The future Speaker of the House, the Speaker of Parliament in South Africa, she called me and said, he has a clearance. And I was taken by it. Oh, he's joined the ANC. Therefore, I gave the clearance. He later on, his wife became the first ambassador post-1994 to Ireland. He joined her. He joined the rest of the class. We managed to resolve the issues. And as he put it to us, the first time he was in a lecture room where he was taught by a black professor. We had a number of people from all over the world, mainly North America. One person was the famous Cedric Robinson, for instance. Therefore, he was completely overtaken. And he did all the kind of activities South Africans. He joined in. And Nomboniso was instrumental in that resolution, because if he was kicked out, it would be on the people, especially who came from Chicago, it would be on the Chicago Tribute. They would become famous for kicking out Vovut's grandson. And my summer school would have been completely messed up. So Nomboniso and others, in a way, Nomboniso symbolized that to me. Symbolized a way of discussing, a democratic discussion, and an engagement. Therefore, I've known her almost for 30 years, and I must say also, it's not only her, also Raymond, who's a partner, who's been instrumental for me to, I would use a stronger term, to survive in South Africa. Therefore, I've been part of South African debates, part of the struggle in the 1980s as part of the ANC. And the two ladies who came out actually symbolized to me what South Africa is. As an Ethiopian, I've been involved in this struggle. Therefore, Nomboniso is a special person for me. And I'm looking forward to hear her thoughts. And I'm thankful that you agreed to be the keynote speaker. Thank you, Nomboniso.
We're at that age. When Abebe asked me to speak, I was rather too eager to accept the invitation. I think it was mainly because I was just looking forward to hanging out with the people that Abebe would invite, because Abebe is very good at connecting people and giving platform to so many people who are normally not heard in our public discourse. And then after I agreed, what did he want me to speak on again? And he said, and I realized keynote address, and I was like, oh God, I don't even know what the fuck a keynote address is. So I went into Google and checked and asked my friends, and everybody was like, there are different types of keynote. By the time I was half into that rabbit hole, I thought I'll just talk to you about my experience of the 30 years of South Africa and the work that we've been doing. I'm a storyteller, a feminist, and an activist whose life in the former Bantustan of Transkei shaped my early years of activism, which landed me in jail at the age of 14 in Transkei. I am also an activist who has been very fortunate to be in all sorts of rooms and corridors in this country. Since 1992, when I entered the world of work, I have focused on a range of areas at the intersection of politics, law, land, and cultures in a democratic state. So I straddle the world of academia, activism, and continuing to understand and unpack and to learn from the early influences of my life in the former Transkei. So it is from this perspective that I'm going to be talking to you today. I want to start on the 24th. Actually, I want to start on the 24th of December last year in 2023, when I, like many other people in South Africa and all over the world, I want to start on Christmas Eve last year, the 24th of December, when I, like many other people in this country and all over the world, was busy preparing for the lunch I was hosting on Christmas Day. Right when I was busy with the measurements of whether the jelly had just quite settled right to go into the first layer of the trifle, a call came through. It brought the news of the death of Constance Mogale. Born in 1971 in the village of Skotaville in Ventersdorp, what is now known as Northwest Province, Constance was drawn into the struggle against forced removals and land justice. She was only 7 when the apartheid government removed that community in Skotaville and took them down the road 200 kilometers. As you know, one of the biggest cornerstones of the apartheid government was land dispossession. It was also an issue that captured the imagination of everyone young people, those who came before us and even those who came after us. Even today, land remains a hot button issue in South Africa. From that moment, Constance was immersed in the anti-forced removal struggles, in the struggles for land justice, and from there, she connected with other struggles, especially becoming a fully fledged political activist. She grew up taking notes in village committee meetings, meeting Black Sesh and other organizations, trying to strategize how they were going to push back against the forced removals. She did everything in that time for that community, including looking after children whilst parents were discussing the issues, including actually reading, teaching children and everybody who wanted to read and write. So she was a child of the struggle. Like many, when de Klerk made his announcement in 1919 that would change the course of history, Constance, the organizations that she was part of, the communities of struggle across South Africa rushed around trying to figure out what are we going to do now? And how do we make sure that land is not taken away, taken off the agenda? So into the 1990s, like many South Africans, the communities that Constance was part of were running around this country exploring options. How should land look like? What did it mean to have reparations? What did it mean to have restitution, redistribution, and all these things? When we talk about the land debate in South Africa, we forget this part. The communities that fought as hard, and imagined as bravely as anyone could to ensure that the kind of constitution that would come after the settlement would reflect the justice that was needed. When the demagogues of today in South Africa talk about land, they only talk about expropriation without compensation. And it actually distorts the whole conversation. Constance led organizations that fought against forced removals because she became a leader in that community when she was young. In post-apartheid South Africa, she led organizations that fought for the constitutional rights of the people in communities like where she came from. Like many, she had no youth. Her youth was in the political struggle. Like many, she had no moment of breathing and say, oh, now we are free, let's now go, I would like to be a tourist, I'd like to do this and that. And the struggle for her continued. I speak about Constance not only because she was brave and courageous young woman. I speak of her because at the time of her death, she and communities all over South Africa, in Xolobeni, in KwaZulu, and Wild Coast, everywhere, had tasted betrayal. When we were approaching the transition, we didn't think that things would go smoothly. We were not naive enough to think that everything would be okay. We knew, as we had witnessed, particularly in the land committee negotiations, that the very constitution that would emerge in South Africa, if it centered rights of people and social justice, that it would be highly contested. And indeed it is. What we did not know was that the very same people that we fought alongside, our comrades, our leaders, that they would also be part of the people that we would have to fight against and insist on the Constitution being implemented. And Constance led that fight. She used every avenue. She and the movement that she led, they used every avenue. The courts, if you look at the jurisprudence of the post-1994 South Africa, particularly the Constitutional Court jurisprudence, you will see Constance's name, taking government to court against the Restitution Act, taking government to court against Communal Land Act. You will see her, and you will see a whole list of communities. We also hoped that by taking government to court, we were helping government to interpret the Constitution. And it seemed that almost everybody in this country, except those who wanted to preserve the previous apartheid status quo, but almost everybody was keen to test the Constitution and to ensure that the Constitution had the widest interpretation possible to make everything that we thought this country needed possible. Everybody, except the ruling party. Constance's life, and many other women, Suzanne Ngubane, and these are women that, even if you're South African, and especially those of you who are not South African, these are women that you will not see in the public discourse, because our media, our politics are shaped in such a way that there are issues and there are people that are beyond the line of vision. So we don't really see the injustice. But what you do see is the continuing of spatial apartheid. What you do see, even if you don't want to see it, when you land in Cape Town, you see how South Africa is. What you don't see is how a government that was supposed to dismantle the legacy of apartheid has in fact used every possible opportunity to entrench the structural legacy of apartheid in the spatial design of this country. Can you show the maps? As you know, the land, okay, just dim it a bit. Let's take it off for a bit. As I started, I said the land question was at the center of the South African struggle. This is because apartheid was not just about the color bar. It was essentially about resources, it was about dispossession, and it entrenched dispossession that came before apartheid. So 1913 Land Act did not create land dispossession. What it did, it formalized land dispossession. And from 1913, between 1913 and right up to the few years before de Klerk's announcement in 1990, apartheid government had been busy with consolidating the apartheid state. And the forced removals and the creation of Bantustans ensured that South Africa, as was seen by the white rulers, was for white people, and everybody else was an outsider. The reserves had already been created before 1913. When people were defeated in the wars against conquest, they began to take land, they began to push people into the reserve. 1913 formalized these reserves. Another important factor is that apartheid government denied Africans the right to call themselves Africans. There were Bantus, there were non-whites, okay, the non-whites included Arab and Indian. But most importantly, they assigned, inscribed, and forced tribal identities, ethnic identities on people. So we were Zulu, we were Tetis, we were Shangans, we were all these things, but we were not Africans. And so South Africa became a homeland of white people after the Union, and states for all these different people came. Okay, let's see the map. So this is the map of South Africa, basically that consolidated by 1990. 1994, this is how South Africa looked. So we thought that one of the key issues would be to find a way to dismantle this, because this goes with everything, with structural inequality, lack of housing, lack of jobs, and all of that, because it was assumed that the people in all the colored spaces would come to the white space to look for work and then go home. I don't need to tell you the details of that. Instead, what we now have is a map that looks like this. So South Africa remains South Africa. And these spots are no longer Bantustan. So we no longer have Transkei, Ciskei, Bophuthatswana. We no longer have that. What we do have are traditional councils. So when you leave the white space, you enter. So when I go home, ideally the ANC would like me to enter a space that is dominantly under the chiefs. And under the chiefs, it means a whole range of issues. It's not just about space, although space is important. It's also about rights that do not exist. Under the chiefs, there will be a traditional court. I can be summoned there. I cannot bring a lawyer. It's supposed to be bringing justice closer to people. Those of us who grew up, I grew up in Transkei, somewhere between 1985 and 1986, I was sentenced in a traditional court for work as a political activist in the student movement. So it had nothing to do with culture and tradition, but it ensured that I couldn't bring lawyers. It ensured that there was no due process. Okay. You can take it off. One of the key issues that, again, doesn't feature in the land debate, in the noise around land expropriation without compensation, is that at the time when South Africa was transitioning from apartheid, hopefully to a democratic state, it hadn't quite, gold was in crisis in South Africa. Gold mining was in crisis. The price of gold had fallen. The gold resources were depleted in the gold mining towns. There was a rush to mine platinum. And the shift from the gold mines to the platinum meant that mining, the core business of big mining, would happen predominantly in the spaces that were former, Bantustans. So the land question, complex as it is also complexified by the shift of mining from the mainstream South African society to the former Bantustans. At the negotiations, actually the ANC won a lot of things. And when I say the ANC, I don't mean the African National Congress alone, because it was representing the parties and the organizations of mass democratic movement and liberation. So there were a lot of gains that were won. By the time the negotiations came, the ANC had already dropped nationalization from its talk, from its politics, from its orientation. Raymond can talk about that. They had dropped nationalization. However, the core of what that nationalization would look like was still retained. So there were big wins there. The first one is that the so-called property clause did not just offer protection for people's property. It also looked at other things. So that clause 25, it looks at how people would be benefited in terms of redistribution. It looked at how people were forcibly removed would be restituted in line of the losses that they suffered. It also looked at how the state would focus on creating land justice in the country. So these were key major issues that were won. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say redistribution will be done through willing buyer, willing seller. That was introduced by the ANC. And it conceded a major policy position that it didn't, no one asked them to. That in the end actually created a lot of frustration in terms of land redistribution in South Africa. So we have right to access to land, we have right to participate in every possible way in terms of the land redistribution. We have right to be restituted for land that was taken from us or for people like Constance and them who were forcibly removed. In the first years of the democratic state, the focus of the land redistribution program was on poor people. It prioritized them. It ensured that all the aspects of land, home, housing, food, and all of that would be included. However, the ANC changed in 1999 and took an approach that focused on the creation of the black industrialist. And an entire program of the government focused on creating black industrialists who would have mines and mining rights and have accumulated a lot of wealth for themselves. This has been done at the expense of communities, and especially black women, who have been at the forefront of feeding their communities, even in the most difficult situations. The land question in South Africa is not only just about rural areas, it is not only just about agriculture, it is about everything else that we see. When you land in Cape Town or even in Johannesburg, you see the shacks on one side and you see all those green spaces that have those blue swimming pools. So you see the legacy of apartheid in the most physical sense. And when you go to those places, you can touch it, you can feel it, you can smell it. The apartheid spatial design is also, as I'm saying, about urban development. Because we haven't sorted out at a fundamental policy level, it's spilling out on all sorts of issues. You go to Johannesburg, downtown, the CBD, there's decay. There is no reason why, when there was white flight in Joburg, in Hillbrow, in Yeoville, and all these places, there is no reason why government didn't actually move into those spaces and create a different kind of community that would bring people who work in these cities closer to where they live. Instead, right at the beginning, when the first group of RDP houses were created, they had the apartheid imprint, both in terms of the architecture, the small matchbox house with a tiny little handkerchief size garden in front. Actually, it's not even a handkerchief, it's like a cocktail napkin size of garden, badly constructed, completely depressing in many ways. No concept of how people can live and thrive. It's not only the architecture. It is also about where it is located, as far from the city as possible. Currently, the DA government in the Western Cape is taking more land, releasing more land to develop for low-cost housing. But all of those are far from the city center. This is the same thing in every city where you go. So there's an assumption that the only spaces that we can imagine for poor black people to live would be even worse qualities than apartheid township houses. What this shows is a disconnection between those who lead and the society that they lead. And this is where the betrayal really is felt. The failure that we're dealing with is not only of policy, because the policy is actually good, most of them. They're bad on the rural communities, but generally they're progressive. But even the progressive policies around health, around education, are not able to deliver the goods because the ANC has a lukewarm relationship with poor people. So as we look at 30 years, the first casualty of that 30 years has been the collapse, has been the relationship between the people of this country and the movement that went into power to represent them. This is a betrayal that is difficult to talk about because in many ways, this was family. When people like Constance would organize marches against government, they would have to first, before they deal with the logistics and all that, they would have to go door to door to old activists like me and explain why they were why they are going against their own government. In her first deposition on communal land, Constance talked about the pain of having to take a government to court, about the issues that her government was supposed to be leading. So this is the level of betrayal that we have to talk about. The elections, to some extent, are an indication of how people are tired of the betrayal. But I think we haven't quite reckoned with what it means. Continuing in this way is madness because it doesn't work. It is stressful for people to live in places that are far from where they work, especially when public transport has collapsed. When a friend told me that she was upset, she was late in a meeting because her lady who assists her in her house came late and didn't arrive at 7:30 as she was supposed to, and the kind of like middle class irritation that. And I said to her, but when you were still sleeping, she was in the queue for the first taxi that would take her to the station where she would take the train. And when she arrived at the train station, she still had to work. So somewhere there has to be compassion around this. But it is difficult if you, and my friend like me, didn't live in a township. So she came from rural South Africa, went to universities and all of that, and then came to the suburb. So the immediacy of what it means to wake up at 4 o'clock to prepare your kids and yourself and to leave your house at 5:15 so that you can go and stand in the first queue is not quite understood. And in that process of taking the first taxi, going to the queue, you could be assaulted along the way, early in the morning. So where people live is not only about just giving them shelter, it is also about dignity. It is also about safety. It is also about an understanding of our society. We know that when government is committed to doing things, they do them. For example, electricity in this country. I don't know, did you get that slide on electricity? Yeah. So there's a problem with electricity in this country, electricity generation, and I don't know why it's not clear. Anyway, but this has been the trajectory because electrifying South Africa was a priority of the ANC, and they ensured that every community gets electricity. We can quibble about the quality and all of that, but this is the vision. You will not find this in relation to land, because there has been no commitment in addressing land. All aspects of land, including secure tenure of people who live in rural communities or people who work in the farms, have been disappointingly a failure in this country. And part of it And this is the second reckoning, before I wrap up, this is the second reckoning that we have to consider as we go beyond 30 years now. You can take it off. Part of that is that we assumed that when we talked about land, we talked about the same thing. We assumed that the people who would lead the ANC, who were leading the ANC, had an understanding of the complexities of South African land questions, as I do as a person who comes from rural areas. Thirdly, we had an assumption that our understanding of the creation of the Bantustan system in South Africa was fully appreciated because we all protested against the Bantustan systems, and that we had a much more nuanced understanding of the complex role that traditional leaders play in that. When the ANC said we are ready to govern, we believed that part of that readiness included all these issues. The truth of the matter is that there is no one land question in South Africa. There are land questions. The second thing is that you cannot talk about democratizing South African society and 3 layers of government, local government, provincial government, national government, provincial government, and local government without looking at what are you going to do with traditional leaders. When you talk about wall-to-wall municipality as we do, you have to figure out what are you going to do about these people who consider themselves centers of power in these areas. This is especially because these powers, they were given by the apartheid government in order to manage the natives on their behalf. So there have always been contradictions in black communities. There have always been power struggles within these communities. What we know is that the trajectory that we have taken in the last 30 years is not going to work in the next 30 years. What we know is that time has come for us to reimagine even this country's economy. There is no reason why we continue to reproduce the kind of economic policies that are not working. Our medium-term budget has just been passed, and again, it focuses a lot on austerity. A government that doesn't invest in its people, and the people, they will say, well, we pay social welfare, we pay these things, but actually there is no investment. There's an obsession with cutting debt. There's an obsession with growth that is going to be driven by the private sector. Since 2012 especially, this has been the trajectory in its harshest moments. And the results are the high unemployment, are the collapsing structures in our society, is the decay that marks where people live. Continuing in this doesn't make sense. But the ANC will continue with it, and now the GNU will continue with it, because the GNU also, in many ways, is an alliance of some of similar tendencies from the ANC and the Democratic Party. There is no doubt that in the next 30 years, the ANC is going to be out of power. And as they grapple with what they should do, we should be grappling with a post-ANC world. In preparing for the 2024 elections, we didn't grapple with a post-ANC world. People said don't vote for the ANC, but we didn't talk about what that means. In the next coming 30 years, we're going to have to build movements that can be feared by politicians. And the only way movements are feared by politicians is if they have numbers of people. The second one is that we're going to have to talk about the issues that have become non-mentionables in this country. A large part of it is about the big extractive industries that abuse people, that trample people's rights in every community possible with the assistance of the and other political acolytes. Thirdly, we're going to have to look at what exactly are we going to do with land. The ANC has now more or less washed its hands of the land question. It's given agriculture to Steenhuisen of the DA. It's given land to Mr. Nyaso of the PAC. So in a way, it is admitting that it is either uninterested in dealing with these issues, or it simply is not capable to. I think they are not capable. I think that the giving of the land of agriculture to Steinhuisen is a confirmation of what the ANC has been doing in the last 12 years. They not only have they prioritized the future black industrialists, they have also marginalized black women completely from any food production scheme that they have. And most of the black women, they are people who have fed their families in the most difficult parts of this country. It's a wisdom that if you are serious about policy, you want to draw from. And they haven't done that, and there's definitely no way that Steinhuisen is going to draw from that. On every area of this country, the Constitution provides for much more substantive rights than it is given credit for. But on every area and on every issue, government is failing. Whether you talk about higher education, whether you talk about basic education, the failures are there for us to see. So in reimagining South Africa, we have to reimagine South Africa after we divorce the ANC. I think many people are not ready for this. I think it is very, very difficult because in a way it's a rupture that we can't even imagine. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think that was, I don't even have words to follow up what Nomboniso has been saying. Thank you so much for making us think really critically about what has happened in the past 30 years and what will come in the future as we reimagine things. Now, one of the ways in which we consider 30 years of democracy in South Africa is also to think about comparative experiences of how other countries in the global south have also experienced similar processes. And through synchronicity, we in fact have a speaker who will come in now, if you will allow us a few more minutes before we have our tea break as well. And this is the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs from Chile, Her Excellency Gloria de la Fuente. I'd like to call the Executive Dean to introduce her, please, and she will talk a bit about the comparative experience with democratization in these two countries.
Your Excellency, Deputy Minister Dr. Gloria de la Fuente, and the delegation from Chile, distinguished keynote speaker Nomboniso Gasa, fellow academics, esteemed guests, students, and conference participants. This year, the University of Johannesburg embarked on several initiatives to mark 30 years of democracy in South Africa. We hosted the President and Deputy President of South Africa and other national executive members and fostered platforms to reflect on South Africa's liberation journey. Our academics have gone out to educate the electorate and encourage democratic participation, but also to better understand and learn from the voters about their experiences of democracy and how their lives have changed over the past decade. And I'd like to thank Prof. Nzenze and the Politics and IR Department for playing a leading role in these activities. Scholarship is critical to the sustaining and growth of democracies, perhaps more so in the humanities than other disciplines. The humanities and social sciences provide the basis for critical and unconventional thinking and appraisal. After the past 2 decades of its existence, the UJ Faculty of Humanities has made immense contributions. Our 13 departments and 10 centers each have an important focus area on aspects of South Africa's democratic journey and development. Our co-host today is the Center for Sociological Research and Practice, and this center has played a pivotal role in such matters as access to service delivery, social cohesion, and now the study of Black geographies and township economies. Here in South Africa and South America's favelas and quilombos, Today's event is a gathering of leading scholars who have contributed and continue to contribute to the study of society and policy in South Africa. We are honored to have you all here at UJ, and we are thankful for the partnership between UJ Humanities, UNISA Press, Skotaville Academic Publishing, Taylor and Francis Africa Journals, Global South Colloquial Fund, Gallery MOMO, Third World Quarterly, Global South's Hub, and Routledge Books. We are also honored and delighted to be joined by the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Chile, an important member of the Global South, with many historical parallels and shared contemporary challenges with South Africa today. Her Excellency will deliver an address to us focusing on these experiences and themes. Deputy Minister Fuente holds a degree in political science from Pontifical Catholic University of Chile and a PhD in social sciences from the University of Chile. She has taught at various universities in the country on subjects related to transparency, integrity, and the quality of democracy. Her professional focus has been on transparency issues, serving as a consultant for the Transparency Council, Eurosocial, and the Network for Transparency and Access to Public Information. She has worked as a project director at Chile Transparente, the Chilean chapter of Transparency International, and has been part of the board of Pro Acceso Foundation. She worked at the Ministry Secretariat General of the Presidency, served as President, Executive Director, and Area Director of the Chile 21 Foundation, and was a member of the Permanent Advisory Council for the State Reform in Chile, and served as a counselor for the Transparency Council, eventually becoming its president. She was president of the OECD Integrity Forum for High Authorities, a member of the Advisory Council of the UC Center for Public Policies. She's also an academic in her own right, having taught at the School of Government of the Pontifical Catholic University of Chile. And with these words, I thank the organizers that have brought us all together today. Ngiyabonga, Kielabocha, Bayadanki, thank you and gracias. Deputy Minister, we welcome you, and let us welcome the Deputy Minister with a warm round of applause, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Camila Naidoo, Executive Dean of Faculty of Humanity, and Professor Ila Rodney Gumere, Senior Director, Division of Global Engagement. And thank you for all of the professors, teachers, students, and my delegation of Chile present here in this room. And of course, dear friends and colleagues, I would like to thank the University of Johannesburg for hosting us today on this panel. Exchanging points of view and debating with the experts and civil society is always a perfect opportunity to analyze reality from different angles and enrich our development with our experience. Today, I would like to address the challenge and trends facing democracy in Chile in a world in transformation. Taking this into account, I might add that this accelerated change in the characteristic not only of the last few decades, but also of a wider area. Not so long ago, at the beginning of the last century, suffragettes in England were fighting for the right of women to vote. An ancient regime of empires and kingdoms were coming to an end, only after the First World War. In this area of change, modern democracy, which began in the former colonies, and Americas was making its way to Europe, incorporating a new essential component in 1949 with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I would like to believe that the world is progress toward democracy, and in this system of government that the best suited of the achievement, sustainable development, and ensuring the dignity of all people. Nevertheless, we cannot ignore the fact that this vision is neither complete nor universal. As far as we know, the international community's response to emerging a problem often take longer than necessary. This is an increasing trend due not only of the complexity, the relation between the state and the organization that we created to consolidate a global order, but also because of a new concern arise along with the immediacy of the communication, putting political planning under tension and forcing us to constant transformation. When we discuss the stability of the international system, we are inevitably analyze the state of democracy at the global level. Likewise, our country foreign policy is closely linked to our democracy regime, and it is through an exercise that it seeks to confront the challenge of the democracy at global and regional level. That is why in Chile we observe with a great interest, but also with concern, the health of the democracy system in the world, particularly between our region. In his book, The Third Wave, the US political scientist Samuel Huntington put forward a very influential thesis regarding the advance of the democracy over the course of the history. Huntington noted that the transition of the authoritarian democratic regimes and vice versa had a global dimension. He asserted that from the 19th century onwards, processes of the democratization and the democratization under no circumstances occurred as isolated phenomenon. Huntington thus used the imaging of the waves to describe how democracy was consolidated in 3 periods of expansion, interrupted by 2 periods of retreat. The first wave is longest and extends from the 1828, the year of the first election, and that complied with democracy minimum of the United States, and 1926, a period in which several European and Latin American countries embraces democracy. The year marked is the beginning of the country wave is Mussolini's rise to the power in Italy, which ushered is a boom on interwar dictatorship. The second wave of democratization driven by decolonization took place between 1945 and 1960, but was quickly reversed by another dictatorship boom in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. The third wave of democratization coincided in some cases of authoritarian decline and is based on the transition of the countries such as Portugal, Greece, and Spain. The end of the dictatorship in Latin America and the collapse of the Soviet Union added of this wave, which seemed to have been the definitive one. In similar vein, Adam Przeworski argues that democracy is inherently fragile, and democratic crises are recurring phenomena in political history. The constant threat of democracy backsliding exposes it to internal and external challenges, and its survival depends on the ability of the institution to effectively respond to political and social threats and jeopardize its as erosion to the party system, the rise of racist, of xenophobic movements, and the discrediting of the democracy value in public opinion, to name a few. All of these issues have a global dimension, which is why it is relevant for us to discussion in various international forums today. And if we took a global situation, we may wonder if the facing a third wave of backsliding. According to Democracy Index prepared for the Economist Intelligence Unit, the Economist Index, almost half of the world population live under some kind of democracy in 2022, 45.4%. However, only 7.8% of the population live in full democracy. At the same time, more than one-third of the world population, 39.4%, live under the authoritarian regimes, which correspond mostly to the population of Russia and China. Unfortunately, democratization is not the leading trend. According to the Democracy Index, democracy is stagnant and we are from to the pre-pandemic levels. And according to the international idea, democracy is in decline. Given that the 2024, one in four countries is moving forward, while 4 in 9 are worse off. According to IDEA, election in 2024 falls finally into the radical uncertainty. Credibility of election around the world was worse in more than the 5 of the countries they covered, 39 of 173 in 2023. That had been 5 years before in 2018. The way that the people engage with the electoral processes has also been changing over the past several decades. Turnout has been going down while incidences of the protests and riots has been going up. In most cases, the inherent unhealthy uncertainty of elections sparks the kind of debates that drive democracy forward. In other contexts, however, it can motivate more hostile disputes and unrest. Authoritarian temptation arises when the conditions that ensure the effective functioning and the legitimacy of democracy weaken. And this is reflected not only in the absence of the periodic elections, poor checks on the exercise of power, fractures in the rule of law, limited transparency and accountability, lack of inclusion and participation, and weakness in the protection of human rights are some of the conditions that Guillermo O'Donnell, a political scientist in Argentinian, identifies as necessary to prevent democratic regime from declining. These are the threats, and we all know about. Democracy is nurtured on a daily basis, an institution, in public debates, in legislation, in the balance of a state of power. The 2024 Human Development Report of Chile, launched by UNDP, is especially significant because it's come after a period of profound transformation and unprecedented challenge. It is the first since 2029 social outbreak and the COVID-19 pandemic. Events that have impacted the country's well-being and social cohesion. It's also the first report published by UNDP Chile after 2 attempts at the constitutional change. Like previous documents, the current report has set itself the challenge of explaining a paradoxical situation. Chile exhibits truly remarkable achievement in human development, poverty reduction, increased life expectancy, and renewed transportation infrastructure are very noteworthy examples. This is the definitely lesson to learn. The paradox is that at the same time, the country is experiencing profound difficulties to change, and this huge challenge that they must face accordingly. Our recent and repeat constitute processes attest to this. It argues that the difficulty of change lies in a complex web of factors. Is it due to the predominance of dysfunctional relationship between citizens, elites, and social movements in subjectives in functioning of institutions and public debates? Despite these difficulties, in UNDP report also states that there are sufficient elements to overcome them. One of these opportunities is the desire of change. People do want change. 88% of the citizens say they want change. 67% want things to be different, neither as they were before, nor as they are now. After 2 rejections of the constitutional project in our country, these messages did not seem evident in Chile, but UNDP report presents us that challenge. Moreover, people prefer profound rather than superficial change. After the constitutional process, Chilean citizens have learned to value gradualness and patience to process of change. This is a path of paved step by step. Another opportunity is the continued adherence to democracy and the favorable disposition to the representation for our civil society. Between this framework, the high intolerance toward inequalities, especially gender inequalities, offer a normative horizon for seeking fairer and more inclusive social arrangement. I must agree that vision in a fertile space for building bridge, bringing together projects for the future and involving people. Building bridge is not only a perfect recipe for the democracy, but also is important ingredient for carrying for our foreign policy and for the construction of a common future. When we consider the promotion and defense of human rights as a special characteristic of the modern era, we So from the point of the view of a democratic system, this is what makes us worthy interlocutors and entitles of us of the work in this area. When we talk about the importance of the multilateral system, we do so aware of we are medium-sized country that can enhance and its international capacity to collaborate global context. However, we maintain this precisely because we are full-fledged democracy. This does not mean that we limit our capacity to dialogue with countries that fall outside the category of the not considered democratic regimes. We are on the United Nations Human Rights Council, not to exclude, but to engage in dialogue and deepen of our effort to promote democracy and civil liberties, freedom of the press, freedom of the association, freedom of assembly, and all over the world. 2 weeks ago, we officially launched Chile's candidacy for the new chairman of the Human Rights Council for the period 2026 and 2028. Chile has always been an active participant in the Human Rights Council. This participation and our firm commitment to the multilateralism explained by our own history, considering the critical role that the human rights institution and the United Nations had in protecting human rights in Chile during 70 years long dictatorship and the transition to the democracy. For instance, in 1978, the United Nations General Assembly created the United Nations Trust Fund for Chile to receive contribution and distribute humanitarian, legal, and financial aid to victims of the human rights violations in Chile. Similarly, the predecessor of the Human Rights Council, the Commission of Human Rights, established in 1975, an ad hoc working group to investigate the human rights situation in Chile, which was later replaced by the Special Reporter for Chile, which operated in 1979 to 1990s. Crucially, these initiatives were relevant not only for the Chilean case, but also demonstrated the effectiveness of international cooperation and the relevant work undertaken by special procedures for the prevention, protection, and promotion of human rights. This explains why, in 1981, the General Assembly decided to replace the Trust Fund for Chile with the United Nations Voluntary Fund for Victims of Torture, which operate to this day. In other words, Chile believes in multilateralism and international human rights institutions because we have been able to experience firsthand the role to the international cooperation and solidarity campaign, it putting an end of the human rights violation, advancing truth and justice, and providing reparation to the victims of these serious crimes. Since the returns to the democracy in Chile and the decades prior of the dictatorship, we have participated in multilateral institutions, we have defended human rights, and we have signed a specific agreement to defend women's rights. We recently launched the Feminist Foreign Policy, an effort to systematize systematized action that had already been underway for some time to establish the far-reaching public policy. The feminist foreign policy is aimed at ensuring gender equity between the Minister of Foreign Affairs, incorporating clauses of gender in our trade and strategic partnership agreements, and supporting multilateral work to protect the rights of the women and girls. But not country exist in a vacuum and therefore there are another risks and concerns. In today's world, there are certain issues that transcend borders and require concerted response at international level. Despite the geographical distance, Chile has provided ongoing support to Ukraine in the crisis it faced after the Russian invasion. We have already delivered 3 packages of humanitarian aid, and our president has communicated on several occasions with the President Zelensky, including the recent meeting they held at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Problems such as the triple climate crisis, mass migrations, and disinformation in the digital public sphere also threaten our democracy and have a global dimension, which is a very clear sign that our world continues to transform more rapidly than anticipated. From our perspective, we also believe that countries with robust democratic systems have greater capacity to provide sustainable response to this challenge. We all know that facing a triple environmental crisis, the climate crisis, manifested primarily by global warming, is already causing severe problems almost everywhere in the world. In Chile, we are suffering a very severe and prolonged drought, which has terrible consequences in the form of forest fires that have scorched thousands of hectares for forests and crops. At the same time, we observe with alarm how the world biodiversity is decreasing. Hundreds of species disappear every year and ecosystems lose the balance maintained by diversity and interaction between different species. And this is a phenomenon that is affecting the entire world, but particularly the global south. Countries like Chile and South Africa are channeling all this unwanted side effect for the world development without taking into consideration sustainability and our ecosystem. This is the worldwide pollution that affects the earth and the oceans, which are sinkhole of untold amount of plastic waste, oil spills, and toxic refuse. Microplastic accumulate in veritable island, such as the so-called Great Pacific Garbage Patch, whose surface area, measured by the most stringent criteria, it's almost the size of the South America and Zimbabwe altogether. In 2022, the United Nations Environment Programme adopted the Resolution 514 ending plastic pollution toward an international legally binding instrument, which mandates the creation of the intergovernmental negotiation committee to develop an agreement with the ambition to the complete task in the end of the 2024. This instrument on plastic pollution includes the marine environment and purpose to contain both binding and voluntary approaches addressing the entire life cycle of the plastic. In this sense, Chile recognized the importance of the comprehensive approach of the agreement to regulate the entire life cycle of plastic, from production to waste management, including provision that they promote an inherency of prevention, reduction, reuse, recycling, recovery, and environmentally sound waste management. At the same time, our country has strongly advocated for the need to protect of the ocean, strengthening of the ocean component of the agreement as plastic is one of the main sources of existing marine pollution that need to be addressed. We are quite aware that the success of the agreement about the, among other initiatives to protect our environment will depend on the countries being able to implement these provisions. Thus, it's essential to create a robust implementation means to development countries, keeping an eye of the flexibility needed to achieve this goal. In this meantime, the agreement under the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea of the Conservation and Sustainable Use of the Marine Biological Diversity of Areas Beyond National Jurisdiction, a long name of course, BBNJ agreement, is defining of the complementary origin to the protect of our ocean resources. Chile's role is an oceanic country. The need to convey decision for the Global South and Valparaiso as safe port to the global ocean governance, and led us to the offer the city of Valparaiso at the seat of the Secretariat. Chile's transition to democracy has taken part intertwined between economic growing and social development, making us upper middle income development country with a high degree of political stability, a strong institution, and responsible microfinance and political framework, and fully open economy. Chile also advanced university and research centers, many of which have world-class capabilities in ocean issues. Our country proposal to the host the BBNJ Secretariat is fully in the line with our foreign policy, which has given the ocean high priority. Our country is actively contributed to the develop of the international law of the sea, including the UNCLOS negotiation and the promotion of the 200-mile principles. This triple crisis demands coordinated responses and major environment agreements such as those adopted every year at the United Nations Climate Change Conference. Now, as a COP, this year COP29 will be held in Baku. Facing this triple crisis is no one of the great challenges of our contemporary world that requires the commitment of state, individuals, academia, the private sector, and international organizations. A sustainable development model goes far beyond just protection of species and risk. Climate change also jeopardizes our ability to meet the nutritional needs of the population. A sustainable model must address as the variable and many others because what is the stake here in our relation with the planet. If we don't take care of the environment, the land and the seas, if we don't ensure the sustainability of our national project, we may approach a much more severe crisis that could unleash unforeseeable consequences. Mass migration, for the other hand, has occurred in the Middle East, Europe, and Latin America always involves multiple countries. The countries of origin, the countries of our countries, or countries of transit, and the destination country. These processes are painful and difficult for all involved. Although there are, of course, migrants who migrate to their own free and will without duress and the greatest difficulty and experience for forced migrants. War, misery, drought, famine, and political and economic crisis can trigger the exodus of millions of people from their country of origin. In some cases, it is due to the weak democracies of government that are incapable to dealing with the economic and social challenge for times. Chile is a nation that been formed a large part by successive waves of the migration of France, Germany, the Balkans, the Middle East, and the other regions. We have the largest Palestinian community outside of the Arabic world. Peruvian migration to Chile has been going to the for decades now, but we had never been the destination country for such large numbers of the citizens of from all other countries, South American and Caribbean countries that have been in recent years. An enormous effort has been required to deal with this wave of the migration, both domestically and international relations. In Latin America, we are addressing this situation through various forums, such as Quito Process, the International Organization of Migration, and the Regional Conference of Migration. The issue of the frequently discussed in instance of the such as CELAC and Organization ECLAC, the Organization of an American State, Mercosur, Cartagena Plus 40, and the Ibero-American Summit. Regional cooperation and dialogue is the longest and most complex route, but one of that can generate the most secure and stable solution of the long term. There are not shortcuts. We must protect the right of immigrants, and we must also look after the community that receive them. In practice, this means that together with respecting and defending the human right of migrants, we have to recognize the limitation of receiving states. We believe that striking this balance between the capacity to welcome migrants and the ability to protect the right of all reinforce the strengthened democracy. The speed of change in our time is most apparent in the evolution of the information technologies. Consider that the worldwide, the web, the digital space is interconnected internet users. Was only developed in 1989, and it was only made available to the public at the end in 1993. A few months later, it was already a standard in global communication that was only 30 years ago. No one can deny the advantage of internet access for gathering information, working together, democratizing access, exchanging data, entertainment, accessible services, and more. Websites are not only the most visible public face of many institutions, but in many cases, they also serve as platform for service and make life easier for citizens. But the internet also has more complicated side. The sphere of freedom of expression has expanded, but exposure to misinformation has also increased enormously. The internet allows us to carry out endless number of the commercial transactions, but can also lead us to victims of the scams. There is greater accountability, which is always become transparency and accountability are essential in any democracy, but authorities are also more exposed to attacks, insults, and challenge to their action of basis of nothing more than the ideological difference. I have closing remarks in a few minutes. We have to seek our national and international tools to improve the overall quality of digital activity and guarantee these tools have been used appropriately. Given the transnational nature of the internet, international cooperation is essential to effectively address the challenge posed for the free flow on digital contents. States must work together for established common norms and standards that promote transparency, accountability, and the protection of both civil liberties and human rights. The digital sphere challenge the 21st century agenda and our understanding of our democracy. So we need to address how is the used for good and for harm in the comprehensive manner and with the resources of our disposal. Considering the challenge exposed in our country, the high intolerance toward inequality, especially gender inequality, offers a normative horizon for seeking fairer and more inclusive social arrangement. This is why our feminist foreign policy keeps moving forward toward the commitment. As migration and the climate crisis, issues related to the digital spheres requires a great deal of conversation, cooperation, new ideas, and the flexibility to put into the practice, we need to reach broad, compelling agreement to tackle challenge we discuss today. From the academic world, I invite you to take on the challenge that have posed the climate crisis, migration, information, and disinformation, because universities and researchers centers must bring clarity and depth of debate of these issues that concern us all. That with consensus and the participation of all, we will stronger and moving towards fuller and more sustainable democracy in the future. Thank you so much. I'm sorry because I so long expressing.
Thank you so much. I think considering the international dimension is so important to bring that into conversation. I think we are going to now have a pause for tea. If I could ask if everyone could be back at 11:30, then we'll continue with the next session. And we'll save a little time with lunch so that we can also catch up with our time then. But thank you so much to the very powerful speakers, the women speakers who have started the day for us. I think it's put us all on a really good footing for the rest of the day. So could we join each other for tea and conversation? Thank you.